Bringing a fresh new perspective on the challenges and issues that face our criminal justice system and their impact on all New Yorkers. This is Justice Matters with your host, President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, Patrick Cullen.
Good afternoon, all our listeners here on AM 970, The Answer. My name is Patrick Cullen, and I am the President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, representing the best court officers in the nation. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to our inaugural show known as Justice Matters. And for the next several weeks, we're going to highlight the very important role our court officers play in maintaining safety and security in our state courts throughout New York. Along with our special guests, we're going to be able to share with you untold stories of the men and women who put themselves in harm's way to keep public safe in our courts. Additionally, it's going to be our intention to gain exposure for what we do as a profession and also add some light to labor issues throughout New York. This show gives us a unique opportunity to spread our message and share with you the experiences of working New Yorkers. Most unions don't have this opportunity and this capability, and we're extremely excited for the potential that it brings. Really wanted to focus on our first show here, tell you a little about myself. Grew up in the Bronx, New York, working class background from a neighborhood known as Woodlawn in the Bronx, where really everybody was a working class individual. We had construction workers, we had police, fire, teachers, Con Edison workers, and everybody there, chipped into the neighborhood. Everybody worked hard. You always saw mom and dads coming off the train and the buses and getting home from work and after an honest day. And having grown up in an environment like that, we recognized from an early age the importance of an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. That's transcended throughout my life and really most likely the lives of all of our members at the SCOA. We're middle-class people. We're really focused on helping people navigate the difficulties that the using the court brings, the unknown. It's also civil service, and so it's steady, honest employment. That's important to people, especially in the uncertain economic times of the last decade and a half. We have the opportunity to know that the work we do is going to be there for us, and so are many of the options and the things that go along with it, which are provided by the union. And so we're going to highlight over the next few weeks a lot of the benefit provision, a lot of the things that the union brings to its members. We have a lengthy and generous benefit portfolio, including dental insurance, vision insurance, a lot of preventative health care issues. We want to bring to you union happenings. We want to bring out a lot of things that are impacting law enforcement in this environment and uncertain political times in this country, in this state, in this city. Law enforcement is sometimes vilified. We want to make sure people are aware that what law enforcement is doing is to benefit and protect you and your families. We want to make sure, and we're going to have some of our elected officials come on, speak about a lot of legislation that's affecting not just uniformed public employees, but citizens of New York in general. We also are really going to highlight a lot of the charitable work that our union does. And that's really important to us, to always give back. We have some educational information we're going to pass along. And so we really think that this is an important issue. The unions in New York built the middle class. And as of late, it seems like the middle class is being forgotten. This show gives us a place to make sure that that doesn't happen. So to share information with you is vitally important to us to make sure that you understand what the union's up to and what we're trying to do to provide a better workplace for you and provide benefits to help your families. It's really an issue. As they say, all politics is local, so we really want to focus on New York City, New York State as a fundamental basis for a lot of what we're going to talk about. And I think it's important to realize what our goal here has always been: accessibility, availability, and accountability. And I think we've brought that certainly to our membership and beyond, and we'll continue to. But this unique opportunity here on AM 970 gives us a platform to really, in real time, communicate some of the issues that the union's facing and that you're facing as an employee. You used to have to wait in New York for your shop steward to go to a meeting every 2 weeks or every month and make sure that they came back with the right information. Possibly, maybe you got wrong information from a shop steward. It's the 21st century, and we are, always excited. We use a website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now we have this as an extension of those platforms to reach you. As I say, we're always in our members' pockets. So if there's an issue of critical importance to the Supreme Court officers and the Supreme Court Officers Association, we're going to make sure we get it out to you in real time, and that anything affecting you will be passed on in immediate fashion, so that we're making sure you know exactly what's going on. There's also a wide array of issues that face labor in general across the country. Some of the things that have happened over the last few years: Constitutional Convention call here in New York was widely defeated thanks to labor and all of labor sticking together. But also Janus versus AFSCME, a landmark Supreme Court decision, which really made us face who our members are, who wants to be a union member, and really allows certain people to freeload from the union. Unionism is about participation. We want you to participate. We want you to be engaged. There is no union without the group. The members are the union. Janus versus AFSCME worked out of conjunction with that. We're disappointed in that decision, but ultimately we persevere. We currently stand our union at 100% membership, and we're extremely proud of that. I know many other unions throughout New York have faced the issue of potentially losing a lot of members who opt out of their union. It's been the opposite. We've seen an increase in union membership and unionism. Younger people are joining unions now more than they ever did before, and that is strictly due to the hard work, the dedication of people who actually get involved with the union, and the loyalty of the membership who have directly benefited from so many of the benefits that we provide and for the protections that we provide. We always want to make sure that you're protected under our collective bargaining agreement and that your rights are never violated. So after Janus came through, we were, again, as a group, as labor in general, we wanted to make sure that we maintained our membership and that we always looking to organize and continue to gain members. And that's been the case throughout the country. And the trend is we're trending younger and we're trending larger. And that's really a testament to labor unions sticking together on the same message. Some of the other things that we'd like to talk about, I think in the future we're going to talk about what happens when you get hurt at work. This happens on a daily basis in a line of work such as ours, our profession. There are inherent risks, but we have to weigh inherent risks versus hazardous workplaces. And so those things, although they may sound separate and apart, are under the same umbrella. We want to make sure that you know what to do the minute you get hurt at work, all the way through figuring out what your future looks like as an injured employee, especially if it's in the line of duty. We want to make sure that we hear right from the boots on the ground, men and women, just like yourselves, our members who support what we do, will appear on this show on a regular basis. They're going to tell us some of their stories. And some of those stories are not going to be the prettiest stories. People get upset in court. That winds up turning into altercations, violent incidents. Who is going to get hurt from that? We are. Now, we know that going into type of work. But ultimately, we always want to make sure we are protecting our men and women when they get hurt and making sure they know what protocols to follow. And so in the future, we're going to really get into a lot of that, because a lot of people are unaware of what to do if you get hurt out of work and you can't work any longer. And that's a terrifying situation to find yourself in. One day, you feel as healthy as a horse, and the next, you are incapable of providing the services that you have for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And so it's really important, and nobody ever knows what to do because nobody ever thinks they're going to get hurt at work, right? So what we want to do is make sure you have a roadmap for the proper protocols to follow, make sure you know what to do, and as always, you can always count on us. And so we want to make sure that you have that going forward. We also just want to make sure and let our union members know, and really all union members know, this is a show for you. We want to hear any topics or issues that you may want us to discuss. Anybody you might want us to talk to about it, you're certainly free to contact myself, my executive board. We're at nysscoa.org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now again, like I said, we have this platform. So as kind of a brief introduction to what we do, we're, again, extremely excited about this opportunity to be able to discuss a lot of the things that are really important to you. And you might not think that they are important to you, but once you hear what we have to say, you're going to know that we are absolutely on your side. So with that being said, welcome to Justice Matters, and we'll be right back.
We return now to Justice Matters with the president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, Patrick Cullen.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. I'm Patrick Cullen, and at this time, it truly is a pleasure to welcome our very first guest, a man who has been a longtime champion of union members and public sector unions throughout the state of New York, State Controller Tom DiNapoli. Tom, welcome to Justice Matters, and I really, truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Pat, I am so honored to be among your first guests on your show, and let me compliment you. You've been a wonderful leader on behalf of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, and hosting this show, more information for your members, and just as important, more information for the larger community to understand the very important work that our court officers are doing, key part of the justice system in our state, often an underappreciated role. So not only will you keep your members better informed about what's happening, but the entire community will know more about the great work that you're doing. So hats off to you, Pat, for really taking another step to be very proactive and engaged in the important conversations that are going out there these days. And certainly in your intro, boy, you touched on a lot of the key issues that are facing your members and certainly facing unions generally.
Yeah, thank you for saying so, Tom. I really appreciate it. And, I just wanted to discuss a couple of the issues that we are facing, kind of on a big picture, to start on a big picture, between the Constitutional Convention call a couple of years ago and the Janus versus AFSCME decision, which I referenced earlier. The last several years have been challenging to public sector unions in New York and around the country. But I'd like to hear just, some of your thoughts on why you think these attacks on labor persist and the ways in maybe your office has helped us out in supporting us.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt there's been a different attitude, unfortunately, taking hold in too many parts of the state that is anti-union generally and certainly anti-public employee union particularly. We saw that in some of the states of the Midwest where really you had, as strong as New York has a labor tradition, you look to some of those states like Wisconsin particularly had great traditions as far as unionism, and yet you saw the attacks translate into changes in who was holding political office, and then they implemented their agenda. So you saw some of the rights that public sector unions had in a state like Wisconsin rolled back, membership way down, and the public workers, and I would argue by extension the general public is going to suffer because of that. What's nice about being in New York is that despite some of the attacks that persist here, I think the public more fully appreciates the role that unions, including public sector unions, have played in our history. And I do think a key battle was that constitutional convention vote, because if you remember, Pat, when, in every 20 years it has to be put up before the voters, and the early polling showed overwhelming support for the constitutional convention. A lot of people don't like what goes on in Albany, so it seemed like an easy way to fix it. Well, in fact, there were many important protections, particularly with regard to pension benefits, but other labor protections and environmental protections and education and so on that would have been threatened had that convention met, because who knows who would have been the delegates and who would have been controlling them. And what happened is labor really stepped up, both private sector and public sector unions, and informed, first of all, your own members and then the larger public about the risks if that would have been adopted. And you start to see the polling tighten up, and of course by Election Day, over 80% of New Yorkers voted no. So that notion that unions don't have the clout anymore, they don't have the credibility, people don't listen to them, well, I think just the opposite. The Constitutional Convention vote, absolutely proved that. There are always calls every now and then to do away with the defined benefit pension. That's a big concern for me as trustee for the pension fund, and that's certainly an area where we always try to get the message out there that the defined benefit pension plan in New York is strong, is good for all New Yorkers, not just for the members. And as you know, I spoke out against the Constitutional Convention as well. So
yes,
I do try to work in partnership with you and your colleagues.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. We don't have a better ally when it comes to that thing, especially on a statewide level. And so we obviously thank you and so many other elected officials who stood with us on that. And you mentioned that you are the trustee for the pension system, the sole proprietor, as I like to say sometimes. You also, stand as a watchdog for so many other financial protections in local municipalities and cities throughout the state that is so necessary when you start to see elected officials, unfortunately, in court. We have someone like yourself up there with the integrity and the courage to stand up to a lot of that corruption and misuse of funds and things like that. But since, obviously the pension system is something that's so vitally important to myself and our members, you just give us an update on how are we looking, so to speak.
Yeah, well, we're looking good. We value the fund March 31st every year, so it's still too early to tell you what our final numbers are, closing out the books, as of March 31st, 2019. But we know that we continue to be one of the best funded state pension plans in the country, one of only 4 state plans, Pat, that's over 90% funded. In fact, when we did the last calculation back in August over the summer of 2018, we were 98% funded. I mean, that's virtually a fully funded pension plan. So we're big, but I always say to folks, not so much important how big we are, but how well funded are we. That being said, December, as everybody knows, was a really down month for investors generally, and we were hit by that as well. Right. So that first quarter of this calendar year of 2019, the markets did rebound. We certainly rebounded. It's a tougher investment climate than it's been for a period of time, but I'm confident, Pat, when we close the books for March 31st, 2019, we are going to be higher than we were a year ago. We were at $207 billion in fund assets a year ago. We'll be higher than that. I don't know that we'll make our 7% long-term goal this year, but that's a long-term goal. Some years we're going to be higher. The last 2 years we were 11%. Some years we might be a little lower, but we certainly ended in positive territory, much better than we were, as of the end of the year. So, for your members, they should know they continue to be part of a well-funded state plan. We have tremendous confidence in our asset allocation. We're paying out now $1 billion a month in benefits, wow. Pat. So that's a lot of money that we pay out, but that retirement security is there. That's what our priority is in managing the fund, and that means because 80% of our retirees continue to live in New York State. Right. So that about $12 billion a year we pay out, 80% of that stays right here in New York City and New York State, back in the economy, helping jobs and paying taxes that benefit all New Yorkers.
Yeah, that's tremendous news, and obviously, we're concerned about growth and protection as the beneficiaries of the fund. And so, long-term goals are wonderful, but as long as we're growing and we're protecting what we have, $1 billion a month, $1.5 billion a month, when it gets to that point, that's going in the pockets of the hardworking men and women who have dedicated their, lives 25, 30, 35 years to public service. And so it's well-deserved and it's well due them. But it's not without your oversight and your guidance of the fund that it is at that level. I just wanted to ask you really quick, because I know that we do have a short amount of time, but, it's no secret that some of the public pension systems have become increasingly more politicized, particularly when it comes to divestment and certain things like that. I just wanted to see if we could get some commentary on what your office is doing to kind of keep politics out of our pension system.
Well, the bottom line is we have to make decisions that are for the benefit of the members, and while there's always a balancing act, we want to have our money be invested in positive ways, in terms of the larger picture. At the end of the day, we have to look at the dollars and cents to make sure our fund stays well funded. That's part of why we are such a strong fund. One of the concerns I have, and you're touching on it during this legislative session, there's a bill pending in Albany. It's been around for a while, but it seems to have a little more traction given some of the changes there in Albany to actually direct our fund as to specific companies that we could no longer invest in, and it's tied to the issue of oil and gas companies and fossil fuels. We don't have the time for me to go into all the things we do to be proactive on the environmental agenda and engaging companies in a positive way to deal with climate risk, but the wrong way to do that is to have an arbitrary list directed by the state legislature. It's a micromanaging of our pension fund that over time is really going to undo the strength of the fund. And it's only targeted at our New York State plan. It doesn't target the city plans. It doesn't target the state teachers fund. So I think it's discriminatory against our members. It's really arbitrary, and it may sound good as a political slogan, but if we start having my friends in the legislature micromanaging where we're investing our money, that's a recipe for disaster that I think is what we've seen in some other states. So I'm strongly opposed to that legislation. I know you and many of our friends in the public sector unions have been speaking out, and we need that, and your members need to be aware that while we're well-funded, there are threats to that moving forward. And I think taking away the responsibility of the Comptroller's Office as the trustee for the fund to make the decisions in the best interest, and we always, I think, strike a responsible balance when we make our decisions, but this kind of a move really, I think, would be inappropriate and would be hurtful to the fund moving forward. So I think we all need to look at it and take it very seriously.
Well, Tom, I really can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes out of your day to speak with me, especially as my inaugural guest. I couldn't think of anybody better. And, we really appreciate all the support you always give us, and you can always count on our support going back to you. So thanks again for coming on, and really appreciate it.
Good. Look forward to doing it again. Good luck with the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Take care.
All right. Yep.
And we'll be right back after a break.
Welcome back to Justice Matters with your host, Patrick Cullen, president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. At this time, we have our next guest on the line. She's a state senator representing the men and women of the 23rd Senate District, comprised of parts of Staten Island and Brooklyn. She is former union leader from DC 37, Local 371, and has been and continues to be one of the leading advocates in Albany for working men and women. It's a pleasure to welcome the chairwoman of the Senate's Committee on Technology and Internet, Senator Diane Savino.
Hi, how are you, Pat?
I'm doing great, Senator. Thank you for coming on our inaugural show here. Really appreciate your time. I know you're busy up there. It's been a busy week or so. And so I appreciate a couple minutes coming on just to discuss some of the overarching things that are happening up there that affect men and women working in New York City, New York State, and, all that good stuff.
I'm honored to be on your inaugural show.
Thank you so much. You were one of the first elected leaders to come out in support of our campaign for safer courts, which was a vigorous advocacy campaign, which drew attention to severe staffing shortages in our courts and the threats to court security. First, thank you for your support. Second,
well, you're welcome.
You're a former labor leader. Can you share with the listeners the challenges union members face in this current political climate?
Well, I came into the labor movement in 1990. It's amazing. It's 28 years ago. I can't believe how fast time flies. But, when I came into the public sector at a time when I know it's hard for people to remember, especially we have a lot of young members now in the legislature,
right,
and they don't really understand how quickly the tide can turn in a place like New York. We are now the safest big city in the world, the safest state on the East Coast, and that's largely because of the policies that we adopted over the years and the implementation by members of law enforcement. But when I came to work for the city of New York in 1990, it was one of the most dangerous cities. Crime was at an all-time high. The annual murder rate was somewhere over 2,000 in New York City. I went to work for the city's Child Welfare Administration. It was the height of the crack epidemic in the city of New York. And so, you can see the amazing difference just in the last 2.5 decades, how good policy can change the world for so many people and actually completely change the lives of New Yorkers. When I started working for the city, New York City was very unionized, but that didn't mean that we weren't at risk for challenges, faced by, bad budget times. Things that rarely change. Good budget times, everybody's happy. Bad budget times, they come for the heads of the public sector workforce. And so the exact same thing happened then that happened, during the economic crisis of the mid-2000s, post 9/11, 2008, when the economy tanked during the housing crisis. Whenever there is an economic crisis, the first thing that policymakers look to do is to take it out on the backs of the workforce, whether it's the public sector or the private sector.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right. And I know I've had the opportunity to spend time with you and hear you speak for a number of years now. And I know one of your favorite things to tell union leaders and members is united we stand, divided we beg. And so, that kind of comes from your experience as a labor leader and what you've seen through, over close to 30 years in the trenches, so to speak. So that's important. And I think, we always have to maintain that mentality of staying together. If we don't stay together, it's going to go bad. And that's evidenced as through our efforts through the defeat of the Constitutional Convention. Without the union support and sticking together and elected officials like yourself coming out against it, we really would have been up against a problem.
Right. It's the most fundamental definition of what unions stand for, banding together for mutual aid and protection.
Right.
That's what it's all about. Because if you try and negotiate on your own, you usually don't do a particularly good job. I mean, if people were capable of advocating for themselves, we wouldn't need unions, right? But we know historically that workers trying to fend for themselves have never been particularly successful.
Yeah.
And that probably is more true today than it ever has been.
Yeah, I mean, unions built the middle class in this city and, continue to fortify the middle class, but I feel like we're fading a little bit. I feel like the middle class is kind of getting lost in the shuffle. And so, I know that you're fighting for our members up there and for all working men and women in New York up there. But I'm worried about, like you said, a new generation. Are they aware of that?
The term middle class itself did not exist as an economic term until after the passage of the National Labor Relations Act, and that didn't occur until 1935. That didn't mean unions didn't exist before that,
right.
But there was no such thing until unions had the legal right, workers had the legal right, the constitutional right to organize. That is what really created the American middle class, and that's something that we're all fighting for. But what the labor movement needs to do right now is recognize that the world of work is changing. So while you and your members may work in a more structured environment for a more traditional employer, the vast majority of young people today, the millennial workforce, is not going to be working in that type of environment. They're not going to clock in somewhere working for the same employer for decades in a defined workspace where there's a set of rules that guarantee a particular set of conditions that they have to abide by.
Right.
And that's what we as policymakers and as union leaders have to begin to wrap our head around. How do we create the next level of protections for workers within the ranks of organized labor? How do we wrap our hands around what we now refer to as the gig economy? How do we make sure that this new generation of workers whose lives are going to be, basically defined by technology and productivity, how do we provide them the same levels of protection and benefits and portability of benefits that we have so that they have that same connection and protect their rights to organize?
Right. And that makes so much sense. coming from someone with your background and experience, now serving as the chairwoman of the state's Committee on Technology and the Internet. We're moving forward to a new way of doing things. We're looking at artificial intelligence, potentially taking a lot of jobs away from people. And, I hate to use the word kids, but younger people, millennials, are working in, coffee shops and WeWork spaces and things like that. So, you're right. Times are changing, but we've always rolled with the times. So hopefully we can continue to do that, Right.
And then we also have to examine, how does technology affect even the traditional workspace? There's no doubt that your members are doing things differently today than they did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. Technology has improved the flow of the work product in the courts. Right. And how can we improve that even further? And then how do we make sure we provide the right types of training for your members as technology is brought in, so that there's still, there's no job loss with respect to the introduction of particular types of technology. Right. Because, again, one of the things that gets lost in this is it's not just about speeding things up in the court system. It's about protecting the people who are sitting there waiting for whatever their case is about, whether it's in criminal court, family court, surrogates court, housing court. We have drug courts now. We have veterans courts. And people don't generally wind up in court, as you know, because they're happy to be there. Nope. There's some problem in their life that drove them to the court system. And there's a lot of turmoil that happens. You guys, I think, were there that day about a year or so ago when there was an incident outside the courthouse in Staten Island, or Supreme Court.
Yes, ma'am.
And it led to a chase, death of 2 people, a shooting. Yes. A woman was shot 3 blocks away. And if it hadn't been for the court officer that responded, it would have been even a bigger tragedy.
Yep. And that's one incident, and covering 38 different facilities in the city and through the 9th Judicial District. These things are happening multiple times a day. So, the recognition to hear from a state senator who's well aware of what we're doing and recognizing that is so important. The budget just passed recently, and we're just curious to get your thoughts on what some hot button issues might be in there that our members and really public sector union members should be concerned with.
Well, the budget is always a mixed bag. I always say it's like the Rolling Stone song. You can't always get what you want, but if you try some time, you might find you get what you need.
Yeah, right.
So, if you're a lefty progressive, you're probably unhappy because you thought you were going to get record education aid and et cetera, et cetera. And while New York State spends more on education than any state in the country, and we spent another almost $1 billion more in education aid, there were people who say it's not enough. So some people are happy, some people aren't. On healthcare, we managed to hold the line on some pretty draconian cuts that were coming along the way. But the state does have a deficit this year. We're affected by the tax cuts the same way other big states are. There are some major changes, though, that were made. We're going to have a commission now to study whether or not we should implement a congestion pricing, or we're calling it a mobility tax plan or something. Okay. How do we raise revenue for the MTA so that we can invest it in the outer boroughs and more transit options? It's going to be very controversial and very complicated. Right. And for unions who have members who go in and out of the zone or who have to work in the zone, you guys are probably going to have to negotiate this at the collective bargaining table. Right. Is there some sort of a rebate or a refund of the tax, whatever the fee is going to be? Right. There's the biggest issue I think that's facing the criminal justice side is there was a campaign to eliminate cash bail, but we didn't eliminate cash bail. We eliminated cash bail for most misdemeanors and retained cash bail for violent felonies. And there's a whole list of particular crimes that would be exempt from cash bail, but that doesn't mean they're not eligible for electronic monitoring. Right. That also is it's going to be a very complicated process to go through. Some of the DAs like it, some don't. There's going to be a lot of debate and discussion around that. Discovery reform is probably and speedy trial are probably the two biggest criminal justice reform issues that will affect the courts and the administration of justice in the criminal courts. Right. So if you have discovery reform, speedy trial takes care of itself.
Yeah, we're obviously really interested in having a seat at the table as to the implementation of some of these issues, because it does affect our employment. But I'm sure that there are people throughout this, the state working in very different types of professions that are also going to look for a seat at the table for the implementation of certain new aspects of how we're moving forward after this budget. I will say, and I can't thank you enough, and I sit at the legislative budget hearings every year, and you're there morning, noon, and night, and sometimes late at night. You are always there and always advocate to Chief Administrative Judge Lawrence Marks that the Office of Court Administration should ask for more money. And we're always appreciative of that, because more money means more safety, more initiatives to make the public safer and to make our jobs safer as well. So we can't thank you enough for that. It's rare that somebody says you should ask for more money, but you are always there saying that, and that's very important.
Well, because we have made some major changes in criminal justice policy over the past 10 years and saddled the courts with more and more responsibility. And the courts are not a governmental agency. And when I say that, I mean they are not part of the executive branch. They are a separate branch of government. And so what they should be doing is standing up and saying that we're not the Department of Motor Vehicle. We're not subject to the governor's budget. We should have our own operating budget, and here's what we need to administer the people's justice, whether it's in the family court or the housing courts or the Supreme Courts or the criminal courts. Right. And we don't have enough. And we know this because courtrooms are closing in the afternoon because you don't have enough court officers to operate a courtroom. You don't have court stenographers. Right. We know that people in the family court are waiting months to have their cases dealt with, because you don't have enough court officers or you don't have enough court clerks to manage these rooms. This is absurd. And the only way to deal with that is you need more money. And so when Larry Marks comes in and says that, we can operate under the 2% spending cap, when we know that's not true, it's frustrating for those of us who are lawmakers who want to be helpful. Right. Don't tell us you have everything you need when we know you don't. That's
and we can't thank you enough for that stance and always having our back, and I'll let you know. We'll always have yours. So I really appreciate a few minutes of your day, Senator. It's much appreciated. And welcome back anytime for any issue that you want to discuss or anything else going forward. Really appreciate it, Senator.
Thanks, Pat. And good luck with your show.
Thanks so much. We'll be right back after this message.
This is Justice Matters with Patrick Cullen, president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. In the second half of this week's show, you're going to hear from some boots on the ground. These are our members. We're only going to use their first name for security reasons. Well, today we have Bill and we have Tom. Guys, welcome to Justice Matters, and thanks for taking the time to join us today.
How you doing, Pat?
Thanks, Pat.
Great. Very quickly, I just want to ask, what is some of the reasons you decided to become a court officer?
Just growing up, my father was an MTA worker. I moved up the ranks in that, so never looked for anything, never had aspirations to do anything too crazy. Just wanted to start a family and be comfortable. Never wanted to, go the route of being rich.
I was a bartender at the time. I had 4 kids. My wife was pregnant with the 5th. We needed medical benefits. She was a teacher. She had to quit a job because the baby was medically frail. I took the test, and 20 years later, here I am a court officer.
Well, that's great. And there's thousands of stories like your guys, and mine's right there with you. And that's what we really, we want to bring home here is that, we're working class guys and girls who, really put an effort into and take pride in what we do. And it's tough work sometimes. And we want to just ask a little bit about that. So, let's talk quickly about some of the challenges we face on a job. Our responsibilities are providing safety and security, generally speaking, providing safety and security in and around court facilities throughout New York City and upstate. What are some of the challenges you've faced? And when I say that, I truly mean what are some of the things you've seen when it comes to the public's reactions and what that might cause in certain facilities? Have you seen scuffles, altercations, violent incidents, and those types of things? If you can just discuss, let us know a little bit about what you've seen when it comes to that type of thing.
Oh, yeah, plenty of fights.
On both sides, take the Bell verdict, for instance. You had two factions both very highly volatile, and the press getting involved and just explosions and scuffles happen, and the next thing you know, you're rolling around, you're trying to protect the innocent people, and sometimes you don't know who the bad guys are, who are stirring things up. So you really have to be aware of your surroundings, of what's going on, and make a quick judgment.
Right, and sometimes that leads to injuries, right?
Oh, many injuries.
Have you guys, both of you, have you been injured on the job as a result of some of these hazardous conditions?
Yeah, I've been spit on. I've been punched in the face. Plenty of incidents. People make shivs, makeshift weapons that they bring in through the Department of Corrections. It never ends. There's these new weapons coming out that are aluminum. They're not detectable by the magnetometers. It's very easy to get weapons in now.
Have you been hurt at work, Tom?
3 times, actually. Line of duty 3 times.
Right.
One time I was run over by a car, actually.
Wow.
Answering a 1013 call. Another time answering a 1013 call with guns fired with gangs up the block. So it does happen, and you have to answer. You have to protect the public. That's what we're there for.
Yep. And this is a small sample size of what's happening every day in our courts. These are 2 gentlemen who have missed work because of the injuries they faced. And again, I want to draw the balance between being injured at work with inherent risk versus working in a hazardous condition. So you brought up two issues I'd like to just quickly touch on. Weapons found in the court. It's something that happens once a week, once every couple of weeks. What's your experience with finding weapons at the entrances to the courthouses?
I work outside, so daily, walking around, checking under the bushes and stuff in front of the courthouse, you find shivs, you find knives. We've even found a gun.
Right.
Just recently, they detected a hand grenade trying to come into the courthouse, and they had to evacuate the courthouse for hours.
Yeah, gangs seem to want to come to the courthouse to hang out. Nobody wants to go to school anymore. And we've had a slashing in the middle of the hallway in the middle of the day between 2 gang members, and it's just constant.
Yeah, and this is an issue that with the gangs that we're going to face now, as Senator Savino said earlier, with the bail reform that's been passed through the budget. We're going to see a lot more of these gang members coming through the front doors of our courthouse prepared for what amounts to war. And so we have to be on our toes now more than ever before when it comes to that type of thing. And I appreciate you guys lending your experiences to letting us know some of these stories. We will continue to do that over the course of the next few weeks on Justice Matters. And it's dangerous. That's what constitutes a hazardous work environment, and we're dealing with it all day, every day. One of the things I wanted to bring up was the campaign for safer courts, which the union launched last summer, and we're severe shortages of court officers in all of our courthouses. So much so that we had to fight back. We had to let the public know and let our employer know it was unacceptable. Just looking for a quick word on your experiences of what you thought about the campaign for safer courts and its success.
Well, it was well done, and it shows with success. We have a class in there now with over 200 people going to graduate in June.
Right.
So they heard us. We made it aware to the public. The public made it aware to them. Our courts need to be safe. You need to do something to help these people out.
Right.
And we've been in constantly in the courtroom where they used to be staffed with 5 officers is now staffed with 3. If 2 of them are running a jail defendant, there's 1 officer in the room with up to 50 people at a time.
Right, and it used to not be that way, so it makes it much less safe. And so, the campaign continues. Tom, you're right. We have a record number of recruits in the academy right now, but we won't be satisfied until we're back to full capacity, because even though you're hiring people, we're still losing people to retirement and to other issues, promotions, and things like that. So we want to make sure that that we continue to keep that pressure on. But that pressure doesn't happen without gentlemen like yourselves, union supporters who came out to a number of rallies which we held. And those rallies represented the voice of, a couple of thousand people who said, we can't be put in this position anymore to be left unaided in our protection of the public. And so, guys, I just really can't thank you enough for coming on. I want you to come on again, tell us some more of your experiences and time. anytime, all right? So appreciate it, and thanks again. And be safe, okay?
Pat, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Pat.
All right, we're going to be right back after this. Thanks for joining us on our first edition of Justice Matters. We'll be back next week at noon.